All right. I've been standing all day. I'm going to sit using our standing desk. There we go. All right. How's it going, guys? Welcome to yet another Workonomy discussion where we discuss common pain points that business owners encounter all the time, and then we find accompanying solutions either through Workonomy services, or we bring in a small business owner or an expert and they come in, talk about their experience as well as what they've learned and their advice on how to overcome such a pain point. Our big obstacle today is how to find an idea and then turn that idea into a business. Carrie, thank you so much for joining us in our Workonomy chats today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh yeah, so as our listeners and viewers know, I always do a prep call with everyone, and you and I really nerded out because we have a lot in
Totally.
common in terms of professional background and dogs. We talked a lot about dogs, um,
Yes.
and you were an editor for American Girl, web and book editor, and I know you're the CEO now for Wonder and Idea Studio with a book coming out. I believe April 30th this year.
Yes.
Awesome.
I'm
And
right.
it's called Me, Myself, and Ideas, The Ultimate Guide to Brainstorming Solo, which is the perfect segue to talk about what we're going to talk about today. So before we do that, I would love for you to do a quick introduction about who you are, where you came from, and why you have the business you have today.
Okay. So like you said, my name's Carrie Anton, and I was working I went to school for English literature, with the idea that I would do some type of writing afterward. And that's pretty much been, as soon as I got out of college, I was an associate editor at, different places, and then an editor and whatnot. And my last spot before going out on my own, I was at American Girl, like you mentioned. I was there for almost 8 years, and I started in web, and then I went on to become a book editor of the advice and activity books. So those are the nonfiction books, and so there's a lot of craft books and game books, advice, that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
So it was during that time that I met Jessica Nordskog, who is she was the co-founder of Wonder, and then she is also the co-author of our book. Um, and she was working in magazine as a lifestyle editor, and then she later went on to become toy product designer. So we were pretty close. We were at a lot of brainstorms together, and the brainstorms like usually really good because it's a very creative company. I mean, you're getting to work with toys and books and dolls and kids stuff, so that's always fun. But some brainstorms are just like any other ones where you come up with some
Hmm.
doozies of an idea. But really at the end of the day, I mean, we loved what we did, but we just didn't always love that we didn't have like control of our creative destiny. And so we wanted to just kind of figure out what that next step was. What are we going to do after American Girl? And so we would get together at like coffee shops and tea houses and you name it, we'd go there. And we would just start making lists of ideas. And Jessica by trade is a designer, and I'm by trade a writer.
Nice
So
combo. That's a good
yeah,
combo.
exactly. So like really like we could use each other's skill sets, pretty well without having to bring extra people in. And at the end of the day, what we found was, there were a lot of times people struggle with coming up with that business idea, like, what we're talking about today. But really, like we just had too many ideas. Like we would have these long lists of ideas of you know, just lists of business ideas that we could do or not do, and we just didn't never know how to make it the decision of like which one should we do because they all felt good to us, right?
Uh-huh.
But at the end of the day, when we kind of stepped back and we started looking at like we're creative people and we really love to come up with ideas, and we had all this experience from not just American Girl, but other jobs and school of brainstorming in different ways, that we were like, this is the business that we need to be running, like this, ideation and creativity based business. So
Hmm.
that's kind of how Wonder came to be. And we started off as a small sort of side run hobby business. Jessica was a new mom, as well as doing a little bit of freelance design. I had just left American Girl and was looking to run my freelance writing business at the time. So this is something we did on the side so that we could be very purposeful about, the types of services we wanted to offer, the type of customers we wanted to work with, that sort of thing. And so we took on a lot of weird, odd jobs in the beginning because we were just trying to figure it out. But eventually we got to like 2017 and we're like, brainstorming is where we wanted to be. It, worked really well with our skill sets. Because before we were doing things like branding and other marketing type things, which really felt better for our other businesses, for our freelance business.
Uh-huh.
So with brainstorming, that could be something we could both give 50-50 to and feel like we were doing it together. And so that's how we landed on brainstorming. And then because I had already been in writing and I was, pitching books and things like that, I met with, or I talked with my agent at the time and, was telling her about Wonder. And she's like, oh my God, that's a book idea, like right there. And so Jessica and I talked about it and she's like, what if because there's so many brainstorming books out there. So that wasn't original, but she's like, what about the problem that we deal with on a daily basis as freelancers and solopreneurs is that, um, you really just have yourself to rely upon for ideas. You can't, jump into somebody's cubicle or pull a conference room of people together to say, hey, can you help me solve this problem or come up with a new product or, whatever it is you need to solve.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how the angle of the book came. And so we're like, oh, okay, so it's a book, kind of geared toward not just solopreneurs, but also people who just kind of think independently, that sometimes they need ideas, they work in the business place, but they just need ideas. And so this was our opportunity to be like, all right, this is going to be the direction of the book. And so that's kind of how me, myself, and ideas came. And so 2 weeks after relaunching the business to be, solely focused on brainstorming is when we got the book deal. So it was very
That's cool.
quick
That's
happening
so
after
cool
that.
that it just
Yeah.
rolled right into it without.
Right. And so it kind
Yeah.
of felt very kismet at that time.
Absolutely. I also love that your idea came from looking for ideas. There's
Yes.
something like you said, kismet. That's also his perfect word for that because, a lot of people when they're looking for ideas are looking for pain points, and sometimes the most obvious pain point is right there in front of you, and you're like, oh, we're going through a pain point while looking for more pain points.
Totally.
And it's really funny that you noticed that and said, oh, this is what we can help with, and so that's awesome. I love that, and I like that's an organic thing. It's not something that you forced. It's not something that you're like, oh, I have to do this now. We'll go into that a little bit too in terms of the process, but let's get into it. How to turn a seed of an idea into a business. I think this is one of my favorite topics to date because we talk a lot about mindset and so having strategy and stuff, but we don't talk about like the actual physicality, the tangible. I want to start a business. How do I even what do I start with in general? I mean, that's a scary transition to make.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to tease the technique a little bit. We're going to have you guys wait a little bit longer, but we talked about you being a writer. So this is the first thing I want to talk about. Freelance writer too. So in a sense, that's entrepreneurial, being a freelance writer, right? And
yes, very much so.
So I'm curious, when you were being a freelance writer, was that did you take that or did you view it as training in terms of being an entrepreneur? Because you kind of handle everything by yourself. You were kind of selling your service, your writing.
Right.
So how did you use that momentum to start a business?
Well, at first, it's funny. It kind of went unrealized because you do it for somebody for so long that you forget that you can do it for yourself. Or at least I forgot that I could do it for myself. And in fact, pretty much from the time I left college, I had been freelancing on the side of my corporate gigs. And so, it started with, one article here, one article there, and then it kind of just spun as you met more people. And especially being already in the writing and editing world, you meet a lot of freelance writers and, just easy to ask them questions of like, oh, hey, how does that work? How did you get into it? That kind of thing. But I will say that over time, you develop a strength working in any position, right? Like you have your work and your experience, and it can lend itself to other things. And I think for a while I overlooked that. It was always in the back of my head that someday I'll go freelance and do this and do only this. But at the same time, you have bills to pay and,
right. You gotta get a little
it's
creative.
scary. Right. Exactly. And so I would say that what I was doing on the side, I was starting to, gain traction in terms of bringing in new clients, finding new, genres to write in, reaching out to more people, even like being invited on things like press trips and stuff like that as a
Hmm.
freelancer. It just really opened my eyes to like, oh, this is how it works outside of, like a corporate structure.
Right.
So it really set me up. I will say that like I wouldn't I wouldn't have done it straight out of college though. Even though writing was of interest to me, even if I had had some of the mentors that I've had, or the just even the people who share their knowledge who've done this, I don't know that I would have done it right out of college, or if I would have been maybe as successful when I did it right out of college, just because my time in corporate was like a different type of training.
Hmm.
Like you're getting that opportunity to see like, oh well, how does this work and how does that work, and like I learned a lot about strategy and and even like things like accounting and selling and all of that, like what it just it creates a much broader view of the world, I think, when you're kind of in those places.
Right.
You work with different personality types, all of that. Like, so had I just been in my home office all by myself since day one, like, and had no other kind of outward experience, like, I just don't think it would have worked as well.
Yeah, for sure. Especially because there are so many moving pieces to a business, and you don't think about that until you start running it and be like, oh my gosh, there should be someone in charge of each thing, and I have to
Yes.
run it all at the moment, and that's
Yes.
that's overwhelming, scary, and a lot of reasons why I'm not going to make it a declarative statement and say a lot of reasons why businesses fail, but anyway, so
But
that's
no,
really
there's a lot
cool.
to take into consideration. And I mean, even once you go freelance, there's a lot to take into consideration that I never considered, in the corporate world. There are things you're just going to have to learn in that sort of small business space. But I feel like I was better prepared to take those things on than had I just like had no kind of real world, work experience. Other people, maybe they can navigate it, but for me, it just this was a better path.
Yeah, and exactly. Everyone has their path. It's not
Right.
that's we always give advice, but I always stress that it doesn't mean it's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
It's just another way to look at it. So maybe you want to do it that way, or you want to test that strategy or something like
Right.
that.
Really, it kind of is, it's a little cliche sounding, but you got to do what you know, right? And so that's true with writing. It's true with running a business. It's true with a lot of things. And I think for like anybody, it comes down to mining your life. Like, what is it that you do really well, or that you have an interest in, or that is a hobby or whatever. Start with what you know, and so that could be anything from like accomplishments, obstacles, pet peeves. What makes you laugh? What kind of pictures are stored on your phone? Like all of those things can kind of give you a little bit of perspective about yourself. And
Mhm.
it's funny because that's how we actually we open the book that way in terms of uh, the book is set up like a normal brainstorming agenda that most people know, and those agendas almost in a group setting that always start with like the introductions, and you go around a table and you say who you are and blah blah blah. But in the sense of brainstorming by yourself, it's just you. And so in a sense, you kind of got to get to know yourself a little bit,
Mm.
and start looking at all of those things. And you and I talked a lot about in our pre call about accomplishments, and
Yes.
how a lot of times it's we look at pain points, and pain points is a great place to start, but it doesn't always have to be from a negative. Like for me, it was like when I did freelance writing, I overlooked writing as being my strength a lot of times. Like when I met with when I met with Jessica, when it came to coming up with the brainstorming business, I mean, we were coming up with businesses that were like yoga and, events and baking. And those weren't our strengths. Like our strengths were writing and design and creativity. And so it was like, it was right there in front of us. And we just didn't like see it
Hmm.
until, we had to put all those lists together and everything else to realize like, oh, this is the issue. And I think it also helped that at the time we were coming up with those lists when we were still in the corporate environment. And it wasn't until we really were like breaking off and doing our own freelance things that we started to realize like, oh, I have to pitch ideas to, magazines or blogs or whatever if I want to write for them,
Hmm.
until you, at least until you establish a rapport with an editor. But a lot of times, like ongoing, there are some publications you will always just pitch, something will never just be assigned to you. So that means I constantly have to come up with new ideas. And what often happens is I will go online and scroll through social media or other people's blogs to see what they've written about, and oh, how can I turn that into an idea? But it's like that was their thing. They wrote it because they had their reasons for writing it. I
Hmm.
needed to find my reasons. And oftentimes, if I would just look at my own life and things that I do daily, things that interest me, things that, I excel at, those are the things I'm going to write better about because they're what I know. And so when it comes to business, it's the same way. If you start with what you know, you're not starting in a negative essentially. You're starting at a positive and
Right.
you're able to kind of move forward from there.
Yeah, and I love that. We did talk about that, and I remember being like, yeah, I mean, it's rare when you hear a business come out from a positive situation because you're trying to fix problems. So therefore, you're looking for problems. That makes sense, and I don't. I still think like that. So I love the idea of accomplishments, and then we talked about how far back that can go.
Yeah.
We talked about how my first accomplishment as a writer was when I found out my friends would pay me $1 to write them a song about somebody.
And I love
Like that. That didn't. I didn't think, oh, this is going to be a moneymaker, or this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, or I didn't think that at all. But now it's funny to trace your footsteps and wow, 24 years ago, I was writing on commission. That's what I was doing. So it's pretty
right.
cool to think about it like that. Awesome. So,
Yeah, and
oh,
so
go ahead.
I love that example, and I also I always the kind of the next step of like when you mine an idea or like mine your life for ideas is to not forget about what you bring to the table. So what's your perspective? What resonates with you? How can you allow your experience shape that idea into something that people need, people want, services that they can acquire. So there's all different ways to come about it. It's you've got to get outside of the linear thinking and start thinking like down different paths.
Right. Awesome. Okay. Here's my favorite part of this talk right now is a
Yeah.
specific technique that you told me about and then we're about to share to help. I think you called it mind map technique. I think there were a couple other ways we call what other things we called it, but
So I think the technique that you're talking about is actually from the book. So the mind map that everybody's used to is what we kind of use to take to the next level, essentially. So we wanted to think about because when you're brainstorming by yourself, you can do it anywhere. You don't have to be in that sort of conference room or in a classroom where everybody's pulling their chairs together. You can do this, at any location, whether it be your home or outside or even on vacation. So we took the kind of common, solopreneur space, and that's the coffee shop, right? So a lot of people do get their work done at the coffee shop.
mhm.
And what we liked about it was, usually when you go to a coffee shop, there's all walks of life, right? And so there's your table, but then you're surrounded by like all these other tables where people are at as well. And so we took that as a way to look at perspective and look at, imagine how you could turn an idea for, like your business based off of the people that are sitting around you. So in a sense, it's like a big, mind map. So your table is that center section,
Mhm.
and you're looking at your, situation. So in the book we have, actually I have the book right here. So
Oh, awesome.
here's the book. It's an advanced copy. But this is kind of what the mind map looks like. And the idea is that, let's say you're looking at a new marketing approach for your blog. So what you would do then is, that's your center, that's your table. Now your offshoots would be like, well, who's sitting at that table? Okay, well, maybe it's, a couple of women in their 20s, they're college students. And so you could start to pick apart like, and you're using your imagination. So let's,
Hmm. Well,
remember
this
that you're
sounds
not,
it's a fun technique too. Yeah, you're gonna have to be a little
yeah, like
creative.
you're not intruding on their privacy.
Right.
I mean, you might be able to overhear what they're talking about, but you're using, cues like visual cues. What are they wearing? What kind of stuff like where are they working at the table? Are like they working on a project together, or are they just casually catching up?
Hmm.
Like I said, you might be able to overhear them. Like, what are they drinking? So you're taking all of those visual cues and thinking about, well, how would I market my blog for that group? You know, and granted, your blog may not be for everybody, but this is a chance to explore like who is your audience?
Hmm.
Like what would those audience needs be? And so maybe then at another table, you're looking at, there's a man in his 50s who's working alone. Okay, well, what do you think he's working on? And who's he talking to on his, or communicating with on his computer? Or what is he writing? Or what does he do for a living? Where does he go at night? All of those things can help to shape your audience, which will also help to shape what, like, for your marketing plan for your blog.
Right.
So there's a lot of really cool ways, and it's all about just asking questions by looking at the world around you. And like, what better way to do that than by people watching?
Right. We're
And
probably
so
already
that's
doing it anyway, so might as well get something out
exactly.
of it, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you have to kind of become like a watcher observer of the world, in order to like take that information and filter it down to what you need. But it's going to be the best way to figure out like who your audience is, who your clients are, what does their world look like, and what is the idea or perspective that I'm offering going to be like for them? How will they be receptive to it? And so it's
Right.
just a kind of fun way of analyzing, you know, whatever it is that you're working on, whether it be, you're trying to first develop your business idea, or you're trying to, flesh it out, or you're trying to, figure out what services you're offering or how you're going to market to people. Like there's all different applications for it. But by looking at, your location as kind of a mind map laid out for you, now you already have kind of things in place that you don't have to come up with.
Right. That's cool. And yeah, I really like that because it's a real life application of something we most of us probably do to a certain extent every day, and B, it
Right.
kind of sounds fun. I will say that sounds more fun than just staring at a piece of paper and just hitting your head against the desk until something works,
Right.
right?
Well, because then you're all by yourself and you're just like, well, who else, is out there? You're used to your world, so your friends and
Hmm.
your family and, your neighbors and that kind of thing. But when you start to get out in the, put yourself out in the world and just, again, just become an observer, at that point, you're just like, oh, I didn't even consider that this age group might really like this, or, this, vocation might want this, and so you
Right.
just become a little bit more aware of what's around you.
Right. I mean, essentially, it's market research. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're putting yourself in a market, and it's what I liked about your idea of a coffee shop is that it's funny. I live in Austin, Texas, so coffee shops are also kind of like bars. A lot of
Yep.
them are. So
I
it's
encourage this at bars with day drinking as well.
right, right on the weekend. Just kidding. What I love about that is that you essentially could do this at the same place at different times of the day, and
Yeah.
probably get a nice varied audience or
Yep.
demographic to look at. So that's a really cool idea. I suggest everyone do it. Yeah, I mean, a lot of us are here are entrepreneurs, and we work from coffee shops and co-working spaces. Co-working space is another great spot to do that, I imagine.
Totally. And yeah, it's, very same, similar concepts. A lot of times, co-working spaces are sort of, open. You have different sort of desk situations or tables or whatnot. So, or there's even offices. So you can kind of play around with, okay, like what is their business about? And, especially if you're a business to business type company, or if that's the type of idea you have, co-working spaces are great in that scenario because you're like, okay, well, what does that person do?
Right.
And how can my business work or partner with them or offer something that they need?
Exactly. And I actually spoke with someone who was in our first Workonomy co-working space. He's the CEO of a company called Greenvolt, and he says that's probably his favorite thing about being in a co-working space is that he gets to isolate himself when he needs to with his room, his office, and then he can go outside and talk to six different CEOs who are all doing six different things, but all equally have something cool to share or something interesting to provide. So,
Right, and just think about that perspective that they can lend,
mhm,
by being in different industries, approaching work in different ways, strategies, all of that. It's like you pay big bucks to go to conferences to meet with CEOs, but in, a co-working space, they're all around you. So it's pretty
Right.
cool.
I like the way you put that. Absolutely. And everyone's probably like on the same, not path, everyone's got a different path, but you're all running the same race, kind of, you're all
Right.
doing the same thing. You're working from the same space. So yeah, I really like that idea. So unfortunately, we have to cut this short, even though we could talk, we have
Oh my God,
talked
it's so long.
hours. Um, but I mean, thank you so much, Carrie. I want to make sure, how can people find well, first your business, so your website and maybe a couple social handles, and then where can they find your book?
So let's start with website. WonderIdeaStudio.com is the website. And actually, the book right now is everything is linked on there. So all the different places that you can pre-order the book. So it
Awesome.
comes out April 30th, and it's available at your normal kind of retailers. Once it's available for pre-order. All those links are listed on the website, and if you once you pre-order it, you'll have it in your hands, I believe, on April 30th. And then for social, we're mostly on Instagram and Facebook, Pinterest, and LinkedIn, and it's at Wonder Idea Studio.
Awesome. Across the board.
Across the
I
board.
love
I
when
mean,
businesses think about that and they just get them all.
I think LinkedIn, you might have to type in Wonder Idea Studio, but I think if you even typed in at Wonder Idea Studio, you'll still find us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Carrie. That was really eye-opening in terms of how to start a business or how to start an idea and to start a
Turn
business.
it
So,
into
I
a
mean, there's a
business.
couple
Yeah.
things to think about here. Thank you. I hope everyone else takes this advice to heart. Let's all go to a coffee shop and start staring at people. Don't stare at them, but let's start looking around and seeing outside of yourself, I guess. I guess that's the big mistake that a lot of people make is they look inside themselves and say, well, I love it, so they'll all love it, right? Whereas you need to like look at everyone else and see how they feel. So thank you so much, Carrie.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate
I'm sure I'm going to see you soon at some point again. So
it.
thanks again. Have a great day.
Bye.
All right. To end it up, let's go standing. All right. So we learned a lot in our Workonomy discussion today. So I appreciate you guys tuning in and taking notes. And I hope you guys do take the advice that she gave. Let's go to a coffee shop. Open your eyes. Look at the market around you. It's not just about yourself. It's a really, really interesting way to do it. It also sounds fun and very easy. So with that in mind, I would like to thank you guys for joining us in Workonomy discussion. And remember, you can continue the conversation in our Facebook and LinkedIn groups, also dubbed Workonomy. We have our experts and speakers who do these videos. They actually can answer the questions within our Workonomy group. Go check it out. Go to Office Depot's Facebook page and then go find Workonomy's group. I hope to see you guys there. I hope I hear more questions because we have more answers coming up in 2019.